Hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And tonight's show, we have Diane Tessman coming up in just a minute. But first, a few things. We actually had to switch Dave Marler. He was supposed to be on tonight, but he had a work commitment, so we had to swap him out for next week, so we can look forward to that next week on March 3rd. Dave Marler will be here then. So I just wanted to say a few things. Over the last week, I've had a lot of communication with a lot of my supporters, and I have to say I'm a very fortunate man. I want to thank you all for such kind words and your continued support. It really means a lot to me. And I do appreciate all the listeners. And anyone can support the show that doesn't now. You can go over to Patreon. That link is on our website, podcastufo.com. And while you're over there, we also have a Facebook page connected to that. There's an icon on the sidebar, and there's, I think, 22,000 people on that page. There's a lot going on over there if you want to check that out. Our latest blog is the second one on the same topic by Charles Lear. It's called The Kelly, Kentucky UFO Goblins, Part 2. And as I said last week, that case is, well, I don't know what word you want to call it, a humdinger. Of an unexplained case. All different types of weird things happen. And if you're new looking into this topic and you never heard of that, go check out the blogs, the two blogs over there at podcastufo.com. A couple of things in the UFO news. Several days ago, I got a number of emails from listeners pretty excited about a cone-shaped UFO that was filmed by NASA at the International Space Station. You can see that online. I'm not really sure. I'm not going to say, well, I guess right now it is an unidentified flying object. But I know that, they launched some CubeSats before and people thought they were, UFOs and all that. What I'm getting at is it may be something explainable. And I would just keep an eye on that. We may find out in the future what that was, or maybe it will continue to be a UFO. And if I find out anything about that, maybe I'll mention something next week if new evidence comes along to the answer for what that is. It may already be answered, but I couldn't find anything myself. So our friends over at The Drive, the War Zone, The Drive, Tyler Rogaway has been on the show, but his co-author over there has written a great story about the continuation of the Colorado mystery drones. And we've talked about that a few times. And the author of this article is Brett Tingley. And he put out a story yesterday that emails obtained through a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act, show that security forces and officials at F.E. Warren Air Force Base were just as perplexed with the drones as the public is. So in conclusion, this may not have been what most people thought the answer for those drones were. They may not be military drones after all. So check out that story over at thedrive.com. Tonight's guest, Diane Tessman. In the mid-1970s, Diane was a field investigator with the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO, and Florida State Section Director for MUFON. But anyway, I'm going to bring her on. We're going to be talking about her book called Future Humans and UFOs, Time for New Thinking. Diane, welcome to the show.
I'm pleased to be here.
And you are in, we were talking just before the show, you're in the middle of the country. You're in the Iowa.
Yes, I'm on the border of Minnesota, but I'm in Iowa.
And you're in corn country, fields and fields of corn. That's what I remember. And I'm not going to get it right off the bat and ask about crop circles, but eventually that might come up.
Okay.
So can you tell the listening audience out there a little bit about yourself?
Yes, well, I was a school teacher for 11 years. I taught English as a second language in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, in Florida. I had always been interested in UFOs. For a personal reason, I had two encounters when I was quite young. I guess you could call them abductions. They changed my life, but I have no regrets. They were not super frightening or super awful. They were actually amazing. Apparently, a membrane in my mouth was taken as a tissue sample. So I started very young, looking at the stars and wondering. And when I moved to California, I couldn't get into teaching. There was a recession on, and also I didn't have my master's degree. So I started a spiritual newsletter that is still going with messages of, predicted global climate chaos and storms and other things that have unfortunately come true. But I've always wanted to work on the science speculative side of things too. And I have written a book, Future Humans and the UFOs, that is logical and science speculation. It's not spiritual, as several of my other books have been. I've lived in Ireland for 5 years and looked into Celt shamanism and Irish herbal medicine. Lived in Giant Rock, California for 2 years. Actually, Joshua Tree, but Giant Rock was nearby, and that's where George Van Tassel used to gather large crowds and summon the ETs down, and that was in the 50s and 60s. I wasn't a part of that. I was there in the later 90s, but that is an interesting area. So Southern California had several good UFO sightings and synchronicities and strange things going on there. So I've lived in interesting places, and I
I'll
came
say.
back. I came back to my native Iowa, where my encounters took place 23 years ago. Bought 10 acres, and I've let it become natural, as the Lakota perhaps would have had it, in the middle of all the corn. And I have a cat sanctuary and a wildlife refuge and three big dogs that are just my three big dogs. They're not part of but I have 51 cats currently in the
Could you say that
sanctuary.
one more time? I must have misunderstood you.
51, but I have a big
Wow.
barn that's heated,
Okay.
big barn. They're not all in the house. I have a new cabin as well for the sanctuary. And then every season but winter, I've got 10 acres for them. So this county has no shelter. So people
Oh,
dump them here. I spay neuter. Another one shows up. And for 23 years, it's been kind of the third act of my life. I've actually enjoyed it. And I get donations from people mostly who still read my spiritual newsletters, which are still going on, even though I've written a more objective book now.
wow. Well, I can tell you're a kind person right off the bat. You're talking about a sanctuary there for these cats. I do have to make an announcement, though, because Bobby in the chat room reminded me, he sent me a text I forgot all about. They had explained that that filming over at the International Space Station that actually was a CubeSat deployment, and then
Mm.
someone added a video, a CGI video to make it look, you know, to make it a
That
hoax or something. So that is no longer a UFO, what I had mentioned earlier, and I apologize for even bringing it up. But maybe a lot of people have been thinking it's a UFO, and now they'll know that it's not any longer a UFO. It was a CubeSat deployment. Um, so, so you had it. You had what you think was an abduction experience at a young age.
Yeah, two of them. One, it was the golden age of abductions. Of somebody's knocking at the door. Uh,
Are, uh, are you
just
saying that this is an abduction right
Yeah,
now?
no, this isn't the.
Okay.
Can you? Should I just go tell them
I'll,
to go away?
that's all right. I'll talk for a minute. You go ahead. Just don't get abducted. Just make sure you come back.
Okay, I'll be right back.
All right. Okay. All right, everyone. So yeah, that's a little embarrassing that I went ahead with the story. I actually did look for about 15 minutes online to see if I could find out what the answer was to that NASA filming at the International Space Station.
Hi, I'm back.
You're back, so it's all
It was the UPS man bringing something from
okay.
Amazon.
I thought it might have been one of your cats or something, but oh, very good.
Yeah,
So
I
we
had two
right before you
abductions.
went to answer, you were talking about you had two of what you think were abductions when you were young, and so go ahead.
Um, the first one at age 4, uh, I have been regressed, but Dr. Leo Sprinkle
Oh yeah.
was hypnotically regressed. But I have a few conscious memories of that. And the conscious memories are, I was sitting on an Earth-like park bench. Uh, this man sat down about a foot from me. My legs were swinging off the bench because it was taller than my legs were, and I was watching a hologram like thing, a swirling. It reminded me a little of the movie theaters when they used to show different colored lights that kept going across before the film started.
Hmm.
Uh, Pastel colors swirling. And I now wonder if maybe that kept me calm because I never freaked out. I was that kind of a little kid. I was an observer. I was smart, but I just sat there, and I don't know why I wasn't more scared. He spoke to me probably in telepathy, but I'm not sure of that. And the words that I think he told me quite a bit, but the words that I remember is, "We are from your future." Now, I know he could have been lying. He could have been a shapeshifter or something like that. But I have spent my life both objectively and subjectively looking into this, seeing, trying to figure out, was he telling the truth? And my conclusion in this book is that he probably was, but that isn't what I base the book's logic on. That's just my personal feeling. And then there was a second abduction that I haven't been regressed on with hypnosis, and all I remember is that we went up to Eagle Lake, Ontario, and there are a lot of UFOs around the Canadian lakes. We, being my family, we were going to have a family get together with uncle and aunt and their two boys, and mom left me alone in the cabin, which was kind of unusual. And this same man came in the door rather quickly. I was alone, and he said, "Do you remember? Are you scared? Are you afraid?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Do you remember me?" I said, "Yes." And that's the last I know of that one. I have no recollection of any of it. But my would-be proof, I wouldn't, stake my life on it, but I am missing that entire membrane that's between your gum and your inside of your upper lip. Sometimes they slit it. I've researched all this. When a baby's born, if it isn't suckling very well, they'll slit it. But this is just clean removed. And I first noticed it when I was about 9 years old, fooling around with makeup. And it was on the outside. I noticed a very thin scar, and I thought, well, did I hurt myself on my tricycle? When did this happen? My parents, both very attentive, said no, they didn't know. And I asked them separately and together. I asked a plastic surgeon once, and he says, well, it looks like a laser scar. Well, this was 1952.
Hmm.
And but then, as the years went by, I figured out it was actually inside that was the missing part, and it showed through or somehow made a small scar on the outside. So, even if there is a mundane reason for that, to me, my abductions are still valid. I mean, other people have abductions without evidence that is that clear. But anyway, that's something that is, I feel like, well, it's right. The evidence is right under your nose was a message that I kind of
Hmm.
received. And I've always been driven to I've always favored the idea of time travelers being either the total answer to UFO occupants or perhaps ETs or other dimensionals. I'm not sure what other dimensionals means. It's not really a scientific. People always say, well, it could be other dimensionals. Um, but ETs could visit us. I'm not saying they don't, but I have to smile when people sort of resist the time traveler, the future human idea. They believe so easily that something from a far, far distant planet, well, of course it's here, but they're not as easily. I don't know if they think we didn't go on, if we became extinct, but if we do go on, we're going to make strides in science. We're making huge strides right now in science. This is the golden age, they say, of science, not spiritual, but science. So, I don't know quite why it's such, um, uh, people resist it, that it's future humans. And to me, there's a lot of logic that it is.
Well, I wonder about that as well. For instance, you're mentioning perhaps, future time travelers or whatever. I've thought about that. You got to think also that 99% of species on this planet have gone extinct, and the way we're heading is not too pretty, I don't think.
No,
But
I agree.
and there's a large amount of extinctions, much higher. It's incredible per year right now. I forget how many species are gone per year, but it's a lot. It's
Yeah.
kind of scary right now. But I saw in your book you have a chapter, I believe, on Dr. Michael Masters and his
Yes.
thoughts.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's a past guest, and actually we communicate a bit here and there. He's a fun
Yeah.
guy, nice
I
guy.
I do too. I agree. Yeah, we
Yeah.
do too. I just had an email from him. I've got a whole chapter that is his, and a whole chapter of Jacques Vallée, and a whole chapter of Jack Sarfati. What Mike Masters, who is an evolutionary anthropologist
Hmm.
and uh, several other titles, and he's an academic and at a big tech university. Yeah, he says the ubiquity, the commonness, or the number of reports describing humanoid and human-like individuals is overwhelming, and I bring that up too. I've got a list that Richard Hall made way back in the 60s and 70s. And I actually dated Richard Hall. He was much older,
Uh,
but I got some UFO secrets from him. He was the MUFON editor, MUFON journal editor, and he edited UFO evidence that is still well thought of. Anyway, back to Mike Masters. He says, taking into consideration their reported relative humanness, it is highly improbable that another planet with different gravity, different chemistry, distance from its sun, would ever, and so forth, there's more differences, would ever develop bipedal humanoid life that would look, act, and talk so much like us, um, or that they would arise on a planet near enough to allow for mutual contact and communication. We're used to thinking of aliens. Those are Hollywood actors that are humans playing them. But then the UFO field comes up with tall Nordics and golden humans. Now, the guy I met, we'll call him a guy, was probably a golden human. He had amber colored eyes that were almost translucent. And outside of that, he was apparently human. I don't know if it was artificial intelligence or what. But anyway, on with what Mike said. I keep interrupting Mike here. Furthermore, given the tremendously long history in the universe, it's highly improbable that such a civilization would arise at the same time as us, be so much like us, but also have just slightly more advanced technology that happens to be so similar to our own. The Tic Tacs and the jet planes, very different and yet kind of playing a game of Top Gun with each other. When you think of how different uh, some machine from a far distant planet might be, the Tic Tacs, to me, they're raising a lot of the time traveler interest right now because they do somehow seem sort of familiar. So the final thing from Mike Masters, in thinking about the statistical improbability of this scenario, we must ask whether hybridization would be possible with such coincidental ET aliens. We can produce with our closest living relative, which is the chimpanzee, with whom we share 98.7% of our DNA. And so it seems unfathomable that we could ever produce with with an ET from an entirely different, distant planet.
I understand what you're saying. You could argue some of what Michael, you were quoting some of the things he said. Evolutionary. You look at other species that have evolved. I know, the different gravities and things. I do understand different type of species would evolve different ways and things like that. But, you have a lot of not bipedal, but you have quadrupeds, and you have the 2 eyes, 2 ears. Everything is made for dimensional work and survival and things like that. So I don't know. I think 2 eyes, 2 ears, that type of thing works in a lot of evolution. But it is interesting to one of the things you also said is the timing. The timing is something that a lot of people, or I wouldn't think about, but it really is. I mean, the timing of how something evolves and to right now, like I talked about earlier, so many things have become extinct. A lot of civilizations probably have never made it, to a higher level of
Right.
intelligence, or maybe they have, but at so many different times this could have happened because, we're a young planet for one thing. So yeah, it's all fascinating to
It is.
kick
It's
around.
fun to, it's one of those things that it's really interesting to go into, and it hasn't really been thought of as far as the future humans. It isn't a very popular subject. I guess it's risen and fallen again throughout ufology, but in recent years it hasn't. Jacques Vallée was actually kind of persecuted for saying, well, it could be something closer to Earth that's in the UFOs.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So we are at our first break. We're actually going to go into a real break at this time, and we'll be right back right after these messages. And welcome back. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and my guest tonight's Diane Tessman. And we were talking just before we went into break, Diane, about extinction and Dr. Michael Masters' thoughts. And, I do understand why someone would think a couple different things. And I've said it a number of times on the show. I don't want to be too redundant, but, why would we be so special that we'd be visited if there are so many possibilities of intelligent life out there mathematically? What makes us special enough? One person I mentioned that to said water. Water is rare to have as much as we do, and maybe that's true. I don't know.
But it's not. It's not that rare. Look at all the moons of Saturn, and
Yeah.
even Pluto has an ocean. I mean, you'd have to get to it through the ice, but water seems to be amazingly in the solar system more than we thought it was. Again, not quite as lovely as Earth and as available.
And it's really a puzzle how it got here, too. Possibly
Yes.
comets. They don't really know exactly how water arrived here at Earth, but it's here in
Right.
abundance. 70 some odd % of the planet. Pretty amazing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what made you decide to write this book in general?
My years of being a UFO investigator, my years of chasing UFOs with friends, and just it changed my life when I was so young that it probably did make me a different person. I've never really had the same goals as many people or many women have, but I've had a very adventuresome life, having moved to Ireland
Oh
and
yeah.
on a shoestring. Never have any money. And, all that is somehow connected. And it just suddenly seemed to be time. And the book kind of wrote itself. It wrote very quickly. And I was so pleased when Phil Mantle said, "Well, let's do it."
Hmm.
I had
Hmm.
I'd proposed another book, sort of a biography to him, and he says, "Well, no, I'm sorry, I don't think so." So a couple months later, I came back, and I thought, why haven't I really said that I'll do this book before? This is my topic, really. This is my book, and he says, "Well, let's do it." So it's the right time with that old time again. It's
Hmm.
time is involved.
Yep. Yep. Let's go. Let's rewind a little bit into your background, if that's okay with you. I want to talk about. We do have a lot of new listeners to this show, and a lot of them may not be familiar with the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization (APRO). Can you talk about that organization and what it was like?
Yeah, it Jim and Coral Lorenzen, husband and wife team in Arizona, ran it, and they were known for doing really good investigations. And uh, at that time, MUFON was just it wasn't what it is now. It was smaller, but it was kind of still the main one. And then APRO was sort of the I don't want to say more respected, but the a little bit more painstaking and more closely shepherded along by Coral and Jim than MUFON was. And I was state section director with MUFON for only about 2 years in Florida, and then moved to California. So that ended that. But MUFON was, or APRO was very demanding as to how to investigate and to get the arc of the sky right, where the UFO, where the person, at what arc was it, and which was always a pain in the neck to me because I'm not all that technical, but yeah, there were some interesting cases.
Do you recall
Uh,
any you'd like to talk about?
uh, I'd kind of like to mention one that that's strange with my brother. This wasn't an APRO case, but I kind of want to get it in because it's kind of food for thought. Um, at the time I was abducted, my brother was 10 years older than me. So I was 4, he would have been 14. And my mother said, "Don't go into Norman's room. He's got a baseball bat and a knife." And he wasn't like that. Usually, he didn't have tons of nightmares. And when when we talked to Norman, or when my parents did, he said 3 little men. He named them Moho and Poe, were chasing him, and he bought that in. He was 14, and yet he bought it into his waking day to defend himself. And it had been, he called it a nightmare or ongoing nightmare. No, I don't think it was ongoing. Even I think he had 1 or 2 nightmares and felt he had to arm himself in the daytime. And I have wondered if perhaps the same get to know the North Iowa human kid, a group of ETs or future humans or whoever they were, um, had tried to abduct Norman, and it just didn't. It didn't go as well as it did with me. I tried to talk to Norm as an adult. We weren't real close, but we talked a couple of times, and he didn't seem interested at all in UFOs. Maybe he protested too much, but the only UFO he could, interesting thing he could come up with as an adult was that he was hiking with his son near Las Vegas on a mountain, and they saw a very vivid, clear saucer-shaped UFO. And shortly thereafter, his son was murdered. His son was 41
Oh,
and a champion kayaker, and went out just to practice, and was found a couple months later. He'd been hit on the head. His body was found on the lake shore. So it was, I guess that, for Norman, if the UFO was an omen or something, he never had a very, very good experience with UFOs.
I guess.
But
Wow.
I have wondered if that was connected to mine, because it had sometimes contact or abduction does run in families. My
Hmm.
mom didn't even believe in ghosts. She was totally non-believer in anything like that. And Dad never said very much. I don't really know. He would have been more open maybe, but
Huh. So you never talked about it with your father?
no, he was North Iowa German Lutheran, and he was kind of that way. He was a nice guy, but that generation too, they don't didn't talk too much about
Right.
their feelings or
Hmm.
anything like that.
So when this going back to your experience when you were so young, did you have anyone you could talk to about it?
No, and I didn't talk to the family about it at that time. It was kind of a dysfunctional family, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Dad had a drinking problem. Both my parents were college graduates of University of Iowa. It was a second marriage. My brother had come from mom's first marriage, and she was extremely emotional and controlling. And they argued so much that I was basically an only child. Norman, 10 years older, was out of the house when he was 17. He left, so I was 7. And I, maybe one reason I haven't been felt a victim of the abductions was that I kind of incorporated them into my private world, I suppose. When I was 6, 7, or 7, I had invisible playmates, or not playmates, a presence I called the remembers, re-member, and they were only around when I was outside, which was a lot. I walked, we had this acreage in Iowa, not this one, but close by actually. And I would walk with the dogs all over the place. And that was my world. And the parents would be in there arguing in the house.
Hmm.
They loved me, but uh, I sort of took it unto myself, and sort of made it my own, I suppose, which is an odd thing to have done. But I was never felt like a victim.
Yeah. Sounds like you were coping pretty well
Yeah,
with, you know,
yeah.
that. Um, and then you mentioned that later on in life, I believe you said California. Did you have
Hmm.
actual sightings yourself? Did you say that?
I did. The best sighting of my life was in Florida, where I was teaching school. Um, it was two big white spheres that hung over Tampa Bay. My house was 1 block from Tampa Bay in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then this is connected. It was they stayed there for hours. There was a small group of people in the park at the end of the street watching these two spheres, and my daughter and I watched them. We took the dog. Had been walking the dog. We took the dog home, came back, and I decided to try and communicate with one of them. And I looked down for a minute, and it disappeared. So I was kind of insulted. And it was the one that left. But the one just stayed there. It didn't dissipate like a rocket launch. It didn't float like a balloon or a Chinese lantern. It just stayed, and I left the park at 2:30 in the morning because I had to teach school in the morning, and I've always kicked myself for not staying to see what it ever was going to do or when it left. But that was probably the best sighting of my life. These were because I never saw the ship on the abductions. These were gee, the size of a full moon, not a huge full moon, but a full moon that's maybe halfway to the apex of the sky. And then I also had that at the same year. I call it my year of awakening. Um, I had strange beeps going on in the house. They started in the television set at 5 before the hour, but then as time progressed, they were in the wall. The wall beeped, the lamp beeped, the clothes dryer beeped, and I thought, well, is this a some sort of radio transmission from MacDill Air Force Base, which is over in Tampa, or was? I think it's closed now. Um, but I took a cassette recorder a half a block away from the house, and it beeped. And then the sort of the climax of that year was that on May, I got to get the date here, May 9th, 1980, a barge hit the Skyway Bridge, which was over Tampa Bay, the same, body of water. I could see the bridge when I was looking at the UFOs. So our house was a block away. A barge hit a span of the Skyway, which is a very tall bridge, and 35 people plunged to their deaths. A Greyhound bus went over. It was
I think I remember that.
Big deal at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that morning I was getting my daughter ready for school and myself, and our smoke alarm, which hadn't been beeping, oddly, it went off. It wasn't, I looked for a fire, it wasn't the fire sound. It wasn't batteries low. It sounded like Morse code. And my dad said, well, I used to know Morse code, but he didn't come up with it, with any message. But then we heard on the TV that a barge at 7:35 had hit the Skyway. And I wondered if maybe the smoke alarm maybe was the energy of these people as they plunged over. It would take a second to hit the water. I don't know. I mean, that it was all very strange. And then the beeps sort of dwindled off. They eventually stopped. They would come, a couple times a day at their height. And then the kicker of this story is that, Mothman that John Keel wrote about,
Mm-hmm.
with the Silver Bridge that collapsed.
Yep.
Well, I remembered I had been outside before the Skyway collapsed or was severed, and something flew over that was opaque. It would be like a huge bird, but there was no flapping. And it had red sort of around it, an edge of red. And the stars disappeared. There was no noise, like a low, it would be a Piper Cub type of airplane, the size. But there was no noise. And I just thought it was one of many kind of strange things that year. It was my year of being strange, or of having strangenesses. And then it occurred to me after the bridge fell, I thought, what if that was Mothman? Mothman, I presume. So that was my my strange year. I usually don't have things like that. Once in a while, there'll be something kind of odd, but that was an exciting year.
I guess so. And that was in Florida. And
yeah, St. Pete.
Yeah, and so you were basically a section director for MUFON. Did you find MUFON was easier to work with an APRO?
Yeah, they weren't as picky or as discerning, and I guess I had more freedom because I could assign people because I was the state section director, because I was teaching and raising my daughter. And there was one case where the electromagnetic charge was the pole, the whatever north or south the polarization was changed after the people in the car had seen a UFO, had a close. It had flown over. It wasn't an abduction that they knew of, but the polarization of the car changed. Um, but
Hmm.
yeah, then when I went to California, I sort of switched over to the spiritual side because I kind of felt I was receiving messages, to be honest. Um, but they are more for the human species than they are for individual. I was never a psychic. I wasn't that good at it, but it was messages mostly about caring for the planet, and that's come to pass that certainly is needed.
Yeah. I think California will do that to about anyone. I lived out
Yeah,
there a few different times. Yeah.
California gives you freedom in a sense, or it did in those days.
Right, right. Yeah, I was out there when I was 22 for a couple of years, and then again, after, uh, I left there about 11 years ago. So 10 or 11 years ago.
And
So it was, no, I'm sorry, 9 years ago. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting place. And I was not doing this show when I was out there, and there's so much going on in the area that I lived. I find out now I was basically in Marin County in Northern California.
yeah, that
Yeah,
would be great.
yeah,
Yeah.
a lot going
My
on there.
daughter lives in my daughter lives in San Francisco, so
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
should go out there one of these days.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot of people really involved in this topic in there. I'm finding, out that way. I've
Yeah.
communicated with over the years, and a major amount of listeners to this show. Of course, it's a high population state, but it's definitely way number one on for listeners out there. And
Yeah, my subscribers also the majority, or not the majority, but the highest number would be California. The subscribers to my newsletters.
uh-huh. And your newsletters are. Can you? What's that about exactly?
Oh, they're the spiritual side of me.
I see.
They're
Okay, you don't have to talk about it. I just
okay.
wondered if it was anything related to, what we're talking about tonight. Um, so, getting
Do the
back to the last thing I asked you was about the.
book.
Are you there? No, it was about Florida. Was there? And you talked about that case with the magnetic, whatever the issue was.
Switch around, yeah.
I wanted to just talk about that case a little more, if you would. Did that car actually, like, stop running? They could never use it again, or what was the deal with that?
It was fixed, but it wouldn't run after they were marooned. It was a family with two kids, and it wouldn't run after the UFO flew low over it.
Yeah.
Which is that's I think why they reported it. They were so annoyed that scared too.
Hmm.
There they were going along. It was in rural Florida, and so they had. I don't even know. I guess they. I think they walked to a filling station or something. They didn't have cell phones in those days.
Yeah. 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 That's something. There's so many of those cases about the car. It making cars go dead. A lot of times, when the UFO goes away, it'll change everything back, and it works. But yeah,
It, the
it's a-
nuclear codes, I think, came back on, but not
yeah.
not this car.
Wow. And were
Uh,
there any other really interesting cases? I really like talking about cases that nobody's ever heard of, and it sounds like you were in this very early, and you may have witnessed, a time where there's a lot of gaps that we don't know about some interesting stories.
yeah, I've my head's been so much in the book recently. Yeah,
Well,
okay,
we'll
there
go
was
back to that for sure, but
right. I know. I'm just trying to come up with. There was a case of a woman, a very smart woman, who lived with with her parents. She was kind of out of place with in rural Florida. She was um, had a lot of for instance, she'd go out on a rural road at night and come home in the morning and feel she had experiences. But this time, there was whom she called a shadow man that she saw And um, then the next day, her father, who was very abusive, was killed, and she always felt it was the shadow man. And then the day after that, she had her first UFO sighting. It was two UFOs that she saw going over, and that's remained with me as because it links the paranormal, a strange, bright, and really lovely person who was kind of a victim of an environment that she didn't even seem to belong in. And then that tragedy, however, he had been terrible to her. And then I mean, did they come as hitmen? It was a strange. It remains in my mind, comes to mind, because it linked paranormal, unusual person, and then actual UFO sighting that her grandmother also saw. She used to. They had a motel, an old motel, and she used to hang out with her grandmother more than her parents. And the grandmother had seen the two saucer-shaped UFOs as well.
Wow. It's funny how I've talked about this a number of times that there was an era where the saucer shapes were more prevalent. You know, it seems like
Yeah.
that's the only thing that I really saw that I couldn't explain was a saucer shape, and I just wonder, it's so strange where now you hear a lot of orb sightings and triangles, and it's really interesting why they would be different. How would that fit into your theory of time travel?
I suppose they just have different models of ships. That's maybe putting it a little simply. The Tic Tacs remind me of the shuttles on original Star Trek. Of course, I am a big Star Trekker. I admit that. But they seem to have the pilot said a funny little protrusion from them, almost like an antenna,
Right.
or something.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. Why would you need an antenna if you're so advanced? But anyway, yeah, they've kind of for some reason they remind people of more of time travel, I think, than the saucers do. I'm not sure why.
Yeah. All right. Let's just go there for a minute. We only have a couple of minutes, but okay. Just say this that the Tic Tacs were time travelers. What would they be doing? Just doing what they were doing out in the middle of the, off San Diego, and messing with a couple of fighter jets. Beyond that, what would they? Why would you think they would be doing that? I mean, I'm just posing questions.
Well, the Navy did those maneuvers every year between Tijuana and San Diego, so the Tic Tacs would have certainly known that. They could have stayed out of the way, or but they appeared on radar before they sent the pilots up. I think the radar said there was a battalion or maybe a unit. I don't know what's in a battalion, but many of them, formations. And so it was almost like they wanted to have that confrontation or that little dogfight kind of. Possibly there might be a drip of disclosure, because it has raised a lot of the Navy said they really don't know what it is, which is new and unusual. And then there is a theory that the whales were migrating and that possibly they were observing the whales. Now that's kind of maybe too saccharine or too sweet or something. Maybe they were going to eat, catch the whales or harpoon them. But there was something foaming under the water or churning that Commander Fravor talked about. And it was the size of a 747. Well, that could have been one of the whales, but the whales were migrating there. And there's up in Oregon, there was a whale migration, and other military reports of Tic Tac, or at least of UFOs around. So
Yeah.
that's
Well, who knows? All right. Well, it's time for us to head into our break, and we'll be right back right after these messages. And when we come back, a few minutes into the show, about a half hour in, we'll take calls. So prepare for that. And we'll be right back right after these. All right. Welcome back, everyone. My guest tonight is Diane Tessman, and we were talking about. What were we talking about before the break? Because we talked during the break.
that strange case I had in
Oh,
Florida,
yes.
the
Yeah.
Shadow Man. Yeah.
Yeah, those cases are really interesting. I love hearing cases that I've never heard about. That's why I was actually talking to you about it. But let's get back into your book and some of the things you have discussed about in the future of humans. What is some of the things you've come up with?
Well, I think that the nuclear issue is part of why they are back here in our skies. I can't exactly tell you why they don't just land and say, look, anything nuclear is more dangerous than you think, and you current people have been too nonchalant with nuclear energy, even nuclear plants that are built on water because they need water intake, oceans or river. And now the oceans are rising. There's torrential rains, there's flooding. What's that going to be in 100 years? With even safe, supposedly safe civilian, just to give us electric energy.
Yeah.
But starting with the concept of nuclear waste that we generate so much of, it overflows the permanent storage, which may not be the greatest. We put it in temporary storage. There is a Danish film that is a haunting and award-winning feature documentary called Into Eternity. It follows the construction of a waste repository at a nuclear power plant in Finland. The film questions the intended eternal existence of nuclear waste storage. This site that has been carefully built in Finland, much better than what the U.S. has in many cases, it cannot be safely disturbed for 100,000 years.
Exactly.
No structure in human history has lasted 100,000 years.
Do we know what happened 100,000 years ago? No.
No, and when you think about it, 100,000 years, how will people even know not to dig it up? Will they even speak English? For all we know, they'll dig it up and think they've got some artifact or some wonderful Egyptian-like container. But leaving, maybe they would know it's nuclear waste, but it's leaking into Earth. And so a big part of my book is asking, what are we leaving to our descendants? And you mentioned we might go extinct. The sperm count of the human race is down 50%. And possibly there's a nuclear war that hasn't happened yet. You can guess that, and the genome is damaged. It might account for the differences in the physiological makeup of the small humans that so many people have seen. Now, Mike Masters says that's just normal evolution, that we're going in that direction. So it's just speculation on my part. But we have been too nonchalant with nuclear energy. And there have been UFOs even around Los Alamos way back in the late 40s. They had an outbreak of red zip-beam lights running around at Los Alamos. And there have been sightings at everything from Peach Bottom, which is a nuclear, where is it here? South central Pennsylvania. They're running out of space, so they're going to just put the overflow in containers stored in an area less than the size of a football field. and there they're going to sit, I guess, above ground. Anyway, future humans may be dealing with a really contaminated Earth. Also, there may be a scarcity of drinking water, of safe drinking water. So, you know, they seem to be trying to tell us that we're too nonchalant with nuclear energy, um, and maybe they don't come down and with a megaphone and yell it at us because there is a non-interference directive or a reason that we're not quite ready to know about them. They would threaten the power structure even if they didn't aim to, more than ETs even, because here would be people, the current people would see that well, this other bunch of humans probably has the cure for cancer and any disease you can think of. They probably could help with the fires, like in Australia, if you had artificial intelligence that they designed, could go into fires or the Amazon fires, and you wouldn't have any loss of life of firemen. And much more efficiently, artificial intelligence could put out fires, all sorts of things that would be helpful. And people could turn away from the powers that be now pretty quickly. So that might be the reason for a non interference directive, because I don't think they really want, grandpa just running around and falling apart, trying to follow them. And uh, they have some ethics, I believe. Um, but I think there is a point where there must be a huge separation between uh, galactic races that learn how to time travel, that develop it, and those that are still locked in time. To me, that would be the biggest separation almost. It would be the biggest event if we realize that's ever happened to us. If we realized that there is travel in time, um, and that would have influenced our history. I'm getting off the point of the nuclear thing, so let me get back to that. Um, of the government installations, Livermore, Sandia, Savannah River, so many of them have had strange events with UFOs,
Mm-hmm.
maybe flying over for a week or two and coming back. There's a nuclear installation in uh, Nebraska that Cooper nuclear plant that had a couple of weeks of UFOs flying over, and they were the ones that got nearly flooded a couple years ago when the river overflowed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think they were bothered by a UFO before that, a few years, but there's just so many cases of UFOs and UAVs being interested in nuclear sites, military and civilian. And you had got to wonder about that stored atomic radioactive waste that we're just building up with not a thought. I was going to say, too, their future human society may not be, I'm not saying it's wonderful, with a Star Trek kind of vision. I hope it is. But they could be survivors or, possibly almost live in space, which would account for radiation damage too, because space is so hard on organic beings due to
Right.
radioactivity. Um,
But
so
if they
I
had
don't
a,
know. There could be just a few of us left, for all I know. I'm not, telling you what their society is like. I don't know.
yeah, they could work those things out too. I mean, if we advance in the future, we will figure out how to protect ourselves in space a little better than we have now. I would imagine. I had done for a while some of the listeners to the show, and they're still up on YouTube on this channel. I did a show called The Everything Else Show where I talk about other topics. And I had Lib Halevi on the show of that show, and we talked about nuclear waste in the future and all that. And I'm, uh, you know, getting off the I hope my listeners allow me to get off the UFO topic for just a second here, and that is I've have thought, for many years, that we are really playing with the mattress, as Stan Friedman used to say. He used to be more or less an advocate for what nuclear
Yeah.
power would be and stuff like that. But what is never talked about, and you mentioned it, and that is the waste. We actually are putting that burden on 5,000 generations into our future for our selfish needs for 100 years. And
That's right.
I think it's just we don't think about it. We always think of the short term. And you've mentioned some things I'd never thought about. What if there's a separation and people don't understand 100,000 years from now where these things are? They're still radioactive and they're still dangerous. The
Right.
half-lives go on and on, and
Half-life, right.
right.
In fact, 100,000 years isn't even the longest half-life.
No, it could be
Some
200.
go on, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, so it's I just think that we are selfish and we're not good to our planet. That's if there was only a way to launch that up to the sun, all the nuclear waste to the sun would be all set.
Yeah,
It's
but
not feasible.
we're not
But
feasible.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
I agree.
yeah, and it is really something that there are so many. There's so many encounters when it comes to nuclear power and nuclear missile heads and warheads, that is, and all that. It's just really amazing.
And a small, well, it's not small. Something you think about in the Great Plains is the tornadoes.
Right.
What if an F5 tornado hits the Nebraska power plant or wherever? You know, and the storms are getting worse. The number of bad tornadoes are worse, and even I think the number of tornadoes in general. But there have been some really horrific tornadoes. I think more in Oklahoma maybe than Iowa. It's been a little south,
Hmm.
but we never think of that, or the rising waters of. I think they shut down San Onofre in California. It was right on the ocean. People surfing on the other side of the freeway, and but they did shut it down, to California's credit.
Wow. How about that? Interesting. I noticed that I think in your book, do you mention the Socorro incident? Because we have a lot of times we have Ray Stanford who wrote the original book on that. That's so good. Did you look into
I
that
do.
case?
I didn't personally, but I have it in the book. Yeah, where I'm trying to find it here.
Lonnie Zamora.
Lonnie Zamora, right? I was trying to get his name for starters. Yeah, was a sheriff or a patrolman, and he saw a craft first in the air, and then he was kind of following it, and then he saw it had landed. And was it two small humanoids got out? I'm still looking
Yeah.
here where I.
That's what
Uh,
he claimed he thought he saw, and they were very small, like he thought they were children, like in coveralls, white coveralls, I believe. And
uh,
as soon as he showed up, they basically saw him, got scared, and shot up. And I think that's when he lost sight of it. I don't know the exact details, so I'm kind of paraphrasing what I remember.
yeah, I'm almost there here. Yeah, okay. He lost sight of the object and the figures as he passed behind a hill, and then he saw an egg-shaped object. Let's see. He glimpsed a shiny car-sized object on the ground about 150 yards away. Near it stood two small figures in white coveralls, and he lost sight of it. Figures he passed behind a hill, and then he saw an egg-shaped object standing on four legs. It displayed a peculiar insignia on its side, something like an arrow pointing vertically from a horizontal base to a half-council crown. The two figures had disappeared, and the object emitted an enormous roar. He charged back to his car. He was frightened and ran back to his car. He glimpsed it over his shoulder, and then Project Blue Book investigators found that Officer Zamora had a reputation for integrity, and they examined what looked like landing marks found on the desert floor. It was in New Mexico, In the middle of these marks was a burned area, apparently from the craft's exhaust. So there was a bit of evidence left behind.
Yeah, creosote bushes burned. Yeah. I've gone into great detail with Ray Stanford because he was there shortly after he had shown up, and he actually saw, the landing marks. In that he has quite the story to tell. In that there was a rock, and I believe J. Allen Hynek was there, and Ray just happened to catch that. He saw a scrape of what looked like metal on a rock. So we kind of waited, and if he's listening, he'll probably call in and tell me I'm getting it wrong. But I believe he waited until everyone was gone, and then he actually took the rock that had the scrape on it. And that's a long story because he had I can't remember exactly what, it wasn't NASA or Goddard, or it was some type of place like that tried to scrape the sample. They were going to leave he was very concerned about that they would scrape the entire sample off, and he could never get anywhere with them. And when he finally got the rock back, that's exactly what happened. It was completely scraped clean.
Shoot.
So he never really found out what that was for metal on there. So if Ray, if you happen to be listening, you want to call in and set the record straight. I know I'm kind of probably leaving some of the facts out of it, but that is one of the really good cases, the really strong case where you have such a man of integrity that has such an incredible sighting. And there were other people that saw that, other witnesses that saw the craft, and there's a lot of people that were trying to spin it as a hoax, but none of that held true.
It's always been a very solid case. In my book, I took older solid cases that had been thoroughly investigated and really stood up. And I did that on purpose rather than taking newer ones that might possibly have fake photos and then also I think there got to be a certain hysteria around abductions, and maybe rightfully so. But I don't know. The earlier 1950s and 60s abductions seemed to not traumatize people quite as much. Whether that was a different group. Of course, with future humans, you could have a group of them from 250 years in advance or even 50 years in advance. It depends when we figure out time travel back. Or they could be from 1,000,000 years in advance. Because once you step out of time, of course, you're not really they're probably not from a year, but there would be different phases. Or maybe they do still have years, but you probably wouldn't have a mixture of 75 years ahead and 2,000,000 years ahead, because they wouldn't have anything much in common either. So now I forget my other point there. Anyway, what I was going to say, after the Zamora case in my book, I've got, I mentioned Leonard Stringfield's work, which seemed to always be, again, with just the small humans. My friend Richard Dick Hall, was the confidant of Leonard Stringfield. So I got in on a few things that I didn't really get in on that many secrets that Leonard didn't put in his crash retrieval booklets, but I got in on the fact that his confidants were usually military guards that had seen the bodies from crashed saucers, and there seems to have been more crashes than just Roswell. And then his informants would disappear when he tried to see them again. They wouldn't. He couldn't find them, and that happened too. So I got in on some of the trials and tribulations of it. But these guards would talk to him, and they reported little humanoids that had been put into hastily prepared wooden crates. They appeared to be 4 feet tall. The witness said. They were lying unshrouded on a fabric. A number of air police stood silent guard around these crates that were going to Wright-Patterson so they could be autopsied. He got a glimpse of humanoid features, heads that were disproportionately larger than the bodies, at least to our perception. One head appeared to be hairless and narrow. In other cases, there was fuzzy, thin hair on the aliens' heads. The eyes seemed to be open, the mouth small, while the nose, if any, was indistinct. Of course, most of them had been burned badly. The humanoids' arms were positioned down alongside their bodies, but their hands and feet were indistinct. Um, in one case, a guard reported that he thought one of them had a muscular chest, and it turned out to be the bumps of a female's breast. And in another case, one was said to be still alive. They offered it oxygen, but it died. And their silver suits were not damaged, but had welded to their bodies because of the heat from fires of the crash. And Leonard Stringfield and Richard Hall were very meticulous, respectable men. The autopsy that turned out to be a fake in the 90s, no comparison. I mean, they were sincere, and what Leonard reported, has been kind of verified in other ways too. I think with Wright Patterson, and to me, that's an area that's kind of not remembered much anymore, and is some of the strongest evidence of ETs. But to me, it's also extra evidence for the fact that they're human, very human.
If they were, we were talking earlier about abductions. We've touched on that a couple of times. So, what people are now they're calling experiencers or experiences, I guess. But if let's just take your thoughts on what we may be seeing in us from the future or future beings. Why would there be so much trauma reported in a lot of what people are claiming happens to them when they're abducted? I mean, wouldn't it make more sense that if it was us from the future, that we'd be more gentle and more understanding with our?
Well, I asked the question in heavy font: what terrible species would abduct human beings? One answer is true: human beings would abduct human beings. We have committed genocide on each other, and still are. We've enslaved each other. We've, in the case of the Native Americans, either genocide or driven them to either arid climates or very cold climates, and we kept the fertile land of Iowa. And so, man's inhumanity to man is endless. And possibly they're a little more enlightened than we are, because they seem to catch and release. And I think they would be, I think it's a military or quasi-military unit, probably trained for time experiences to come back. I don't think it's pedestrians on a vacation. I think it's a military trained thing, and they are to be cold and distant and scary, so that we don't really start to chat or catch on to anything. And I think they need something from us, because there are so many tissue samples and similar. Possibly for DNA, maybe we are having trouble with our too much nuclear radiation with our DNA. So I think the reason that they catch and release and are frightening is because that's the way they're ordered to be. And, for all we know, maybe a lot of it is artificial intelligence that humans created. I don't think that we need to think ETs create to me it makes sense that artificial intelligence might be lacking emotion, unless you get into conscious artificial intelligence. But to me, that answers your question fairly well.
I
all
see.
that I just said.
Yeah, yeah. So if the one thing I'm sure you've heard a million times of the butterfly effect. Um, the next question I'd say to you, like, so that just goes along. If someone alters the past, then they alter, perhaps themselves being born. You can alter one thing
Right.
in the world basically, and it may change some events that makes it so the world doesn't happen the way it had. That type of thing. If you went back in time. And the one thing that I just think of is, they're not hiding. They're not, there's, a lot of people experiencing these things, and it seems like it would alter or could alter the future. Maybe not a UFO sighting, but maybe a UFO sighting could, the
Well,
Tic
that
Tac
gets in.
UFOs could have altered, things. It has altered some things right now as far as what the Navy is doing and all that. Who
Yeah,
knows?
that gets into physics, to the Novikov loop that Dr. Sarfati taught me about.
Uh-oh.
So I don't
I
know if
have
we
no
have
idea what you're
time.
talking about. Go
Right,
ahead.
right.
Yeah. What is that? What is that you're talking about?
It's Novikov was an old Russian in the 1800s that came up with this, that physics does accept as fact, that you can't change the future, because if you think it whatever you did, you did do. You can't escape. In other words, you can't kill your grandfather because you exist. So it's a non-escape. I know the multi-world theory. This gets says that there are alternate dimensions, but whether we can actually get to the alternate dimension, we may be locked in our original path, and then other yous would go in the alternate dimensions. But Novikov loop says that it's almost like a predestination, that you are locked into. I'm not getting my definition wording exactly right, but that you can't change the future, because what you think changes the future always happened. So I guess if you cause somebody looking at a UFO to get run over by a bus, they would have been run over by the bus anyway. So they really can't change the future.
Wow.
That's
My head
physics.
hurts.
So does mine.
Wow. Wow, interesting. So I'm going to open up the lines. If anyone wants to call in, ask our guest a question. That number is 855-472-5483. And we do have a race screening call standing by. So if anyone would like to call in and ask our guest a question, please do call. And speaking of that, and just a reminder to the people that listen to the show, I'd love to have a lot of calls coming up on a show that's going to be just a listener show only. It's St. Patrick's Day. I hope that doesn't curtail anything, but it is on March 17th. That's a Tuesday at 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Love to take your call. You can talk about sightings or whatever you want to speak about. So that's coming up on the 17th of next month, which next month is just in a couple of days. So, yeah, that's interesting. So many paradoxes and things to think about when you're talking about time travel. I remember as a kid, as a joke, I used to say, I had a lot of corny, stupid things I used to say. I do admit that, but I used to say that time travel will never happen because we don't see anyone from the future. Well, maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe we do.
How do we know
Yeah.
might be the question. But I don't think that they just come down. You'll have people on video that say, well, I'm a time traveler and I'm always really skeptical of that,
Oh,
because
yeah.
I,
Who was that guy that was saying he was the time traveler? It was really on Art Bell, and he was on a
um,
bunch of different shows.
Basiago, him?
Uh,
No, I don't want to name somebody that wrongly.
yeah. No, it wasn't that. He had some
Hi.
type of... What's that?
Hi.
Oh, you got a couple calls coming in, Race.
I see it, but it was tighter.
That's it. Titor.
That's it. Thank you.
Titor. Whatever happened to him? Well,
I don't know.
we have some calls coming in, and they're just being screened right now. So I will take that in just 1 second before we get into our next topic. But yeah, that guy was really something. He was on a whole bunch of shows, and he had claimed all these things. And when it came right down to it, he said that he was sent back because he was sick or something. I can't remember exactly what that was. But I don't know whatever happened to him.
Well, to me, the beauty of my book is that it's just really connecting dots that we've never connected. And, I don't say you got to believe that, but it's just something that's been overlooked. And I think it kind of makes sense to at least, think about it. It's not I'm not an expert on them really. I'm looking at it from where I am here in the current place and thinking, gee, maybe it is us.
Wow. Yeah. So I don't know if we're having issues with the phone. I'm taking a look at that now. Hopefully everything is all set going on with that. But we do have a couple of calls lined up, just waiting for the go here to take them. They keep hanging up. I wonder if they're hanging up on. Anyway, yeah, these are all thoughts you can kick around. Of course, no one really knows the answer. It's just it's just something to kick around. Have you had a lot? You said you've communicated with a few people, at least Dr. Michael Masters.
Jack Sarfati, to a limited degree. We not Jack. Sorry, Jacques Vallée, to a limited degree. Jack Sarfati and I talk every day. We're kind of friends on email. But Jacques Vallée gave permission to use his paper, and I was very honored at that. He said something here. You can interrupt me if the call comes through, but I just wanted to quote. He says, from this paper that's in the book, such travelers could perform many of the physical feats ascribed to UFOs, and they could also manifest simultaneously through what appears to us as different periods in our history. This hypothesis represents an updating of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which, in fact, who visits us can be from anywhere and any time and could even originate from our own Earth. And that's what he has always, he's mentioned fairies and things back in history, and then they updated themselves to spacecraft, whatever they are. But he doesn't disallow that there are future humans. That isn't his answer necessarily. But this quote does sort of describe future humans, or could. And he's involved now in venture capital with going to space. So he obviously thinks there's a future that he's creating or participating in making, which is what Dr. Sarfati feels too.
Wow, really interesting. Yeah, Jacques is quite an interesting guy. I guess I'm going to tell the people at the phone. I'm not sure what's going on at the KGRA radio. Race is working on it, so I will pull the phones for right now. I was hoping this wouldn't happen again, but anyway, we're rebooting the system is basically what it looks like what is happening. So callers, hang in there. We'll be back with asking you to call in a few minutes. So just hang in there, and we'll let you know how that goes.
I was interested in the fact that Travis Walton saw small beings who he was scared of at first. He had been hit on the head or zapped with the ray from the ship, or the energy hit him, and he had a head injury, and he really attacked or freaked out at these little beings. I think they were kind of insect-like, And I remembered in hypnosis two little beings, or little, I guess, small humans that got me to where this one, I call him my special one because he didn't give me his name. I don't aim it as a huge endearment, but that's what I refer to him. Um, at one of the little beings that seemed to get me to where I was supposed to go had a more insect-like look about him, kind of like an Iowa grasshopper. But so Travis sort of attacked or started to these little beings, and they just stood there. And then that's when the golden humans, that term, uh, kind of annoying for some reason, but anyway, the almost perfect looking humans showed up and apparently saved him, did something medically. They took him somewhere. And so my experience matches Travis's in that in hypnosis, I remembered the small beings also. I don't remember them consciously, but the being I met, the guy, was would be considered a golden human. He wasn't a tall human. He just had casual hair. I mean, he wasn't military like. He was, but his eyes were different. And I believe, in the illustrations of Travis's experience, those also had kind of different eyes, almost wide set, really wide set, and maybe kind of translucent.
Travis has been on the show a number of times, and I've actually talked to him at an event. We hung out together for quite a while, and actually, he's very intelligent and well spoken, and
Mm-hmm.
we got into talking about all different topics. But asking him about, first of all, about the beings, the small ones that you mentioned, he said the eyes were just incredible. Something about their eyes was just incredible, like
Yeah,
the way
I
they
don't
stared at him,
remember.
and
Huh.
and
Yeah, I don't remember there. So, huh. What were they? The big goggly, almost like they had black goggles on? Because I've wondered if maybe they did have black goggles. The really dark black eyes with a really large.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah, those were scary.
then he said that the ones you're talking about, the other ones, he said they were absolutely beautiful people. He said, I don't know how else to
Yeah,
describe it. They were just
yep.
amazingly beautiful people, but they
You
said
never
nothing.
forget them.
He thought thought he was saved, and then to find out, they wouldn't talk, and that really puzzled him.
But they
And
did save him, actually, didn't he say that? With at least that's what I've read. I have never. We're
I
friends on
think
Facebook, but I've never chatted with him.
I believe he said that they put a mask on him. I may be getting that wrong,
He had a
but
head injury or a.
yeah. Oh, that's the part you're talking about. Is
Ye-
when he was talking about the fact that he believes that this was a rescue mission. That's what you mean. When he got
Yeah,
zapped by the light. He thinks that
yes,
was more
that
of a
they
rescue mission
stayed to
than anything
rescue
else.
him. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right, we're going to try to take this call. Cross your fingers, everyone.
Okay.
Looks like we have Andrew calling again from Connecticut. Andrew, you on the line?
Yes, hi. Can you punch my frequent caller card first?
I don't know what that'll get you, but yes, okay.
So my question for Diane is just, is she familiar with a theory, and I think this might have been first proposed by maybe John Keel, that our dimension is, length, breadth, width, and time, and we are, all the molecules in our dimension are vibrating at one frequency, and that other dimensions vibrate at other frequencies, and that's one of the mysteries we see or phenomenon with UFOs.
Uh-huh.
Do you come across that? Do you find that that's probably one of the more valid theories on how these interdimensional creatures or craft come and go?
Yes, I would wonder. Yes, I do think it sounds one of the more valid. Do you think that they can a- actually do nuts and bolts or hands-on, like tissue samples or the landing mark, the actual evidence throughout the years? Would other dimensional beings be able to interact with our dimension that much, or do we just see them in the I wonder that. Um,
Yeah.
but who knows, I guess.
Yeah, I've heard it. I've heard it theorized that they can enter our dimension and stay briefly, but that it's harmful to them to stay long term because their molecules and so on aren't tuned to this frequency.
Right.
That's why they can't stay. I think when you look at modern physics and all the different fields out there that they're constantly studying and expanding our knowledge, that is one of the more valid theories. One analogy he gave, this is John Keel, was that we're like fish in a river, and we can swim anywhere we want in our river and go up, go down, look all over the place, but we're stuck in the river. And that other creatures can leave the river and walk up to the top of a mountain, look around, and then come back into the river wherever they choose. And that I thought that really stuck with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I that would seem one of the more valid to me too. I guess I'd say, having been talking a lot with Dr. Sarfati, that if we could get the formula for time travel, it's almost, Occam's razor that says the least number of assumptions is the right answer. Well, it's a very big one assumption that we'll be able to go back in time. But Einstein never said it's impossible. So I guess for me, I would think that was maybe more likely, but it could be both, or I could be wrong. That's entirely possible. And I think your theory is a good one.
Great, good. That's about what I thought you'd say.
Okay.
Andrew, thanks a lot. And don't forget the 17th, you have to save me. Andrew saved my call where I was going to have to cancel the show, and we talked for quite a while. So I won't forget that, Andrew. So thank you.
Okay, guys.
All right.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Have a good night. All right. We have on the line, we have Ward calling from Florida. Welcome to the show, Ward.
Well, thank you, and hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
You have a question for our guest tonight?
Yes, I do. Well, and maybe you too. I've had a lot of synchronicities. I mean, they've been blowing up. It used to be every once in a while. Now I'm getting like maybe 20 a day. And I saw in a different video that this is happening all over the place. But then when I contacted somebody else, they said, no, it's not happening to them. Is she having any kind of synchronicities, or you, or is it, or is this something that, really isn't happening?
I have synchronicities fairly often with my best friend of over 40 years who lives in California. As far as synchronicities happen, I mean, here I am out in rural Iowa. There's almost nobody to bounce it off of to find out if I'm having a synchronicity or not.
Well,
but yes, I certainly have them fairly often. Not as often as you're saying.
Yeah, it hasn't ramped up because it used to be. I'm sorry, I just haven't put something in my mouth. It used to be that I was getting them every once in a while, and yes, I would think of something, and I'd hear my daughter say it, or my mother say it, or a person online say it. But now it seems to all be like electronic, where I'll be thinking of something, or I'll have like two things going. I'll have my radio going and the TV going, and at the same exact time, like the radio says washing machine, all of a sudden the TV says washing machine. and it happens constantly. And I just never saw it so crazy like this before. And I'm just trying to figure out, is something coming, or, what's going on?
I've certainly had it happen. I know what you're saying, but not as frequently. What about you, Martin?
Okay.
I think I did. At one time I did notice, but I do thank you for the call, Ward. Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Next we have Brock on the line from Dayton, Ohio. Isn't that near Wright-Patterson?
Wright-Patterson. Yep.
Brock, how are you?
I'm good. Right, Pat's like 10 minutes from here, so.
Yeah. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Yeah. So, I guess I was wondering, kind of along the lines of what Andrew was saying regarding, these aliens being able to kind of dip in and dip out of time. I was wondering, if Diane thought that maybe they were, higher dimensional beings in that, a fourth or fifth dimensional being could see, perceive the passing of time, like we perceive, width, height, and depth.
Yeah,
And,
depth.
yeah, but if you get to higher level, up to 7, 8, even 9 dimensional, it's not only can you see the passing of time, but you can also see different alternate universes, where things say where different events happen, and it creates a different timeline, and as these higher dimensional beings, and this maybe is how they navigate through space-time, is they can perceive these different timelines and stuff, and they're kind of moving back and forth between these different timelines and different pasts and futures. I don't know. Is that something you thought maybe were
that could be, I guess. There's two sides sort of to the UFO issue. There's subjective and metaphysical, and then there's objective and scientific. I know Dr. Sarfati, who's a really aggressive science thinker, would say, well, that doesn't match our knowledge of what we know, but then there's a lot we don't know. But on the subjective side, I'll just say that what you're saying is subjective. There's no, it sounds like a metaphysical explanation, which could be valid. I mean, metaphysics in itself is a deep topic, and I know it goes into 10 and 11 dimensions and all, but it's not science as we know it today, and I've certainly I respect it. I don't know if I believe exactly that, but who knows?
Interesting. Wow.
That's
Well,
kind of boggles my mind.
We're two sides of a coin. We're scientific and we're spiritual, and then metaphysics would be on the spiritual side, science, logic, even practicality on the other side, and humans are both science and spirit.
very good. Anything else, Brock?
Not at this time, no. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling in. We have now Julian is calling from Quebec. Hey, Julian.
Yes, sir, Mr. Martin. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well, yes. So you are north of me.
Yeah, all right, that's pretty good. Okay, look, listen, sorry if my English is pretty bad.
Oh, that's all right. No problem.
Oh, all right. Lately, I've been listening those story about Linda Moulton Howe with those Antarctica, deep story and things, those caves and everything that. Anyway, when you listen to her, it's like a big major picture. But I felt like those things might be coming from an original story, like Busiji Mountain. I don't know if you heard about the Busigi Mountain, Martin. I was wondering if you heard about it because it seems like the same story.
No, I'm not. I may just not understand the. What is the name of the mountain? One more time.
It's called Busigi Mountain.
No,
And,
I'm not familiar with that. That doesn't ring a bell.
Really?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Oh well. Well, that was my question, actually.
Well, certainly Antarctica is intriguing. I'll just add that.
Yeah, there's.
They're talking about this. I mean, where I am right now, I'm thinking about all those things seems to be related to some kind of inner Earth civilization somewhere. I can't. There's something out there, some kind of intelligence, but I'm trying to figure where it could be standing. If they have like those super massive, those engine able to move like speed. Anyway, it's like if you have a super engine that can move light speed. If you leave your home planet with light speed, you can come back to that home planet. Your time phase is completely different. You're like just if you're alien super advanced species off your planet with a light speed experience, you're like trying to deal with different other planets to. That's where I am. Like, I'm just like thinking about all this. Like if I was like some kind of super advanced alien race with this kind of light speed technology off my own planet, what would I do exactly? I'm gonna leave you with that, Martin. And, nice to see you also, Flower.
All right, thanks for the call.
Okay,
thanks for listening to the show.
All right.
Well, any thoughts on any of that?
I love that people search and enjoy thinking about it, and it kind of works in with what I really want of my main mission in my book. It isn't to persuade everybody that it's us from 50 years in advance or a million years in advance. It's more that I think we've kind of dug ourselves we're in an abyss currently, in a mini dark age, and I want our human spirit to reawaken. When Buzz and Neil walked on the moon, the whole world stopped and watched them, and we're a species that needs to reach out. We do so much kind of bickering and dickering here, and social media and computers. We've gotten so much kind of into ourselves. We need challenges. I don't want to sound like JFK, but we need to do it because it's hard, not because it's easy.
Right.
And if we imagine something, it usually comes about, whether it's fire or airplane. And I think we'll get the key to time travel. But even if we don't, we're going to go on into the future until we don't. And we need to reawaken our connection to, ancestors inspire us. Maybe a great aunt survived the Irish famine, came over to Ellis Island. That's an inspiration to a woman today to be strong. And there's a bridge also to our descendants. And we've totally ignored that. Nobody even we love our grandchildren, but that's as far as we go. We've kind of severed that link to the future. And
we
that's
don't know,
my main mission.
Yeah.
It's just to get that across.
A lot of times, we forget just a couple of generations away. We have no idea what that was about, ahead of us.
That's right.
Until, there's genealogy study now. The internet is really a wonderful tool for that. But, prior to that, it was, it was just looking up records and, no details of someone's life. That's all just kind of gone in the abyss unless someone has documented it. But anyway, so where can someone find your book? It came out, what was it, the 1st of February?
Yes, it's on Amazon, both Kindle and paperback, and it's only $15 in paperback.
Was that $50 or $15?
15. My mouth is getting tired.
Well, you can rest it now. We're at the end of our show. Thank you so
And,
much.
okay, I was going to say that if they wanted a newsletter, to go to my website, earthchangeprediction.com, and contact me that way. And thank you. I enjoyed it.
All right. Excellent. All right, everyone. So thanks very much for listening tonight. And we will be back next week with Dave Marler. And I want to thank everyone that helps out with the show. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.